First of all, I am honored to be introduce my dear friend, Marc Rowan. As many of you know, Marc graduated Wharton undergrad and grad in 5 years, then joined Drexel Burnham and co-founded Apollo, where he's the CEO. But that's what you know. Here's what you might not know. Marc has been on a journey supporting the Jewish people and the state of Israel for over 40 years. In the bullpen of Drexel, we co-founded something called Youth Renewal Fund, YRF, building supplemental education opportunities in the periphery of Israel. But in true Marc style, that wasn't enough. He pushed for more. We merged with a charter school network called the Darca network, and now we have over 50 schools in the periphery of Israel. A remarkable accomplishment. But let's not stop there. Marc has spent well over a decade lobbying for legislation to protect the Jewish people. He became chair of UJA, and as if that was not enough, as chair of the Wharton board, he used his leadership skills and moral compass to fight antisemitism on college campuses. So you might ask, how does he do all of this? Rising at 5 a.m., he inspires everyone around him. He returns messages as always and is always willing to lend a helping hand. Some even laugh when he has early morning meetings to rally the troops, and he rewards good behavior, merit good behavior, and personally walks the walk each and every day. Frankly, I'm the luckiest girl alive to have had a front row seat next to him. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I know I will each and every day. Thanks.
With that build-up, we can only disappoint.
Thank you.
To Hope Tates, to Glenn, who's not here, to your proud parents, to Sylvan and Joan. Where are you guys? Over there. Nice work with Hope, a builder of our community. Hope, we are so very grateful to you for your leadership. Thank you so much for all you do for us and for the Jewish people each and every day. To you, Marc Rowan, if all we were here to gather to do is to say 2 words, thank you, that would be well worth the evening. Toda Rabah, thank you for all of your leadership.
There we go. We're done.
All right, go home. Hope just gave us a overview that you are not a Johnny-come-lately to the cause of the Jewish people. But I was wondering if we could begin tonight's conversation, and we'll go for some time, and then we'll open it up to questions. Your activism obviously preceded 10/7, and I was wondering, is there a personal story, something that inspired you to your lifelong commitment to combating anti-Semitism and bolstering Israel?
So Hope already stole the punchline here. Literally, a group of us were sitting in the bullpen at Drexel Burnham. And for me, this is year 40. It's not quite as many years for you, Laura, I know. But all of us were where we were as a result of education. All of us were Jewish. All of us had already achieved our life's ambition. No one thought they would actually be where they were. And so, not knowing anything about philanthropy, we decided to give back and start our own philanthropy in Israel. And one thing led to another, and as Hope said, we're now 50 schools, 30,000 kids, 3,000 teachers. We are the single best school district in Israel. And so as part of that, I used to take 4 trips a year where I am the tour guide. I take 30 young people to Israel. And so I was very integrated into Israel's security issues. And 15 years ago, I forget where I was reading it, the conversation on university campuses, the conversation in state legislatures was about BDS. Boycott, divest, and sanction. The notion that we would sanction the only Jewish state as a result of things it had done and ignore everything else going on in the rest of the world. And I don't know about many of you, but I'm motivated when I'm pissed off. And I was motivated. And I spent a couple of months going around and visiting everyone I knew in organized Jewish philanthropy. Everyone whose name is on a synagogue, on a wall, I saw. And it was very clear to me that we just did not have a strategic approach to the challenges we were facing. And so back then, I kind of divided it into 3 buckets. One, legal and economic. We have a legal and economic fight. The second is we have a hearts and minds fight. And the third is we have a safety and security fight. And of those 3, the most difficult is hearts and minds. But I thought we could win the legal and economic fight. And I actually think we are winning the legal and economic fight. And I went door to door in the Senate for a piece of legislation called the Antisemitism Awareness Act, which defined anti-Semitism as anti-Zionism in shorthand. And it got through the Senate, just to remind people, 99-0, including positive votes from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Chris Van Hollen and people we would never expect to have voted for it today. And we ran out of time in the House. Ultimately, President Trump in 1.0 signed it into law as an executive order, and President Biden honored it. And it is the basis of all of the lawsuits that we see today under Title VI. And I'm hopeful that we will also see it signed into law now in Trump 2.0. But this fight of organizing around legal and economic just showed that we just had not gotten our act together as a community for all the talk of how powerful the Jewish community is and all the positions of influence. We just were not using it.
Right, so I want to get to the prescriptive, to Title VI, to the administrations and otherwise, but I want to stay on the diagnosis for a moment of what went wrong. What went wrong, it sounds like the Jewish community, you're suggesting, were asleep at the wheel, but something also went wrong in the university system as a whole. You are most known for your activism, the Close the Checkbook campaign at University of Pennsylvania, but let's talk about universities as a whole. This didn't just happen on 10/7. What happened as you understand it?
This is I'm going to hit the weak spot of what I think of the Jewish community and how they approach this, because we, as a country, we had a really good idea. Who does not want people who have not had opportunity not to have opportunity? Who could be against that? And unfortunately, the illogical conclusion to that very sound idea was that we were going to divide Americans by characteristics of their group. And then we were going to decide which groups were more valuable than other groups. And then we were going to admit people to school on that basis. We were going to hire instructors on that basis. We were going to resolve conflicts on that basis. We were not going to look for truth. We were going to look, right and wrong didn't matter. We were going to look at the impact on these groups on that basis. The only thing is, we never got to decide which groups we wanted to be in. We never got a vote in which groups were valued. We outsourced that. And so among the most un-American things I'd ever seen happen, we forgot that people are actually individuals. We sorted them, and we afforded them influence. We afforded them lack of judgment of any action they had done based on their aggrieved status. And this became institutionalized in our universities. Some just unaware. Some misled by the notion that this was actually a good thing, that we could advance people who had not opportunity. But make no mistake, there is a hardcore group of administrators and educators within these institutions who fundamentally believe this is how the world is structured and how the world should be, and this is the outcome that is desirable. Call it a post-colonial education, call it aggressor, however you want to define what's happened. This group took hold of the structures of power in many elite universities. And I stick with elite universities because it has not happened across our country. And we as alumni and we as trustees and we as involved board members were just asleep at the switch, and we were too cowed to say anything because we didn't want to offend women, people of color, people of minority status, of different sexual orientations, or anything else. We actually discriminated against them by excusing them from the basic judgment of right and wrong, of moral and immoral.
So let's get to University of Pennsylvania. Let me preface this. I'm married to a Penn alum, Rabbi Kaufman, went to Penn. I think
everyone does something right.
You can't swing a cat in this community without bumping into a Penn graduate. You, I believe, were the board chair of Wharton, or you still are the board chair of Wharton?
So now I'll use my standing line, which is the governance at universities is so bad that I am still the board chair. Okay. Just imagine for a moment that the board chair of a subsidiary called for the resignation of the board chair of the parent company and the president and asked all alumni on national television not to give to the university and to only give $1 so they knew you did not forget them. I'm still there. The governance is terrible.
Maybe you should go to rabbinical school. Okay. So, what was happening? The Palestine Rights Festival, then of course 10/7, and then of course. So what can you share with us?
The summer ahead of 10/7, Palestine Rights Festival is coming to the University of Pennsylvania. Palestine Rights had come to the University of Pennsylvania for a really long time. There is nothing inherently wrong with a festival of Palestinian literature and writers, and people don't have to like Israel. They can be critical of Israel. What had happened in this particular year is the conference was outsourced to a known anti-Semite and Hamas sympathizer. And the conference is on the university campus. It is endorsed and funded by university departments. At the beginning, students were required to attend, and it happened to be on a high holiday. And essentially, the university was lending its imprimatur to this, and the lineup of speakers included well-known anti-Semites, anti-Israel, anti-Zionists, and former musicians of Pink Floyd. And so I picked up the phone and called the president in the summer before this was even well known. And I said, you have a problem. And this is not a problem of free speech. I'm perfectly in favor of free speech. And I wrote this to her. But we don't have free speech. You put your finger on the scale by allowing the university to endorse this. If you want this to continue, you should revoke your imprimatur from it and let people say what they want. And this is I'll get into the problem of what I see not just at university, but I know this is at Columbia, this is Cornell, this is all the elite universities. They have, in many ways, the same problem. The president of the University of Pennsylvania, Liz McGill at the time, is not an anti-Semite. She's not a bad person. But what was her job? Who does she work for? No one knows. We had, like Harvard had, like Columbia had, a really long-term successful president, Amy Gutmann, and before that we had a long-term successful president, Judy Rodin, and they eroded the governance so that the trustees did not actually function as trustees. So when poor Liz McGill was hired and she was confronted with a crisis, she had no place to turn. There was no one who told her the university should be interested in merit, interested in free speech, interested in intellectual diversity. She lives in an academic community, and she did not have the wherewithal to do this. And she had lots of notice that this was going to be an issue. And before October 7th, more than 20,000 alumni had come together and told the university they were not going to fund them. So this was well in advance. October 7th comes, and then you get into other issues of leadership. She did not handle it the right way. Leaders, you, me, others in this room, we have a leadership shadow. It is not just what we say, it is how we conduct ourselves. And so on 10/7, Liz had the misfortune of posting on social media of her dancing with her dog in the rain. And it took her about 2 weeks to actually think about condemning this. And by then, it was really over. I mean, the community had lost faith in her. And then, of course, the interview with Congresswoman Stefanik and Congresswoman Fox, where they could not actually just say that calling for the genocide of people was against university rules. No one should be surprised that they did not say that. These people live in a bubble. And in the bubble, that is how they think. And it's our job, I believe, to change how they think. And I think we can do it.
Would you put the emphasis on leadership, who's running the university, or is something about the sort of scaffolding of the university system so sort of endemically dysfunctional that we just have to rewrite the script and it doesn't matter who's leading the university?
I think the prescription is actually governance. My experience, having stepped forward at the University of Pennsylvania, is, and I'll take UPenn, which I know the best, the vast majority of professors at the University of Pennsylvania are totally sane and totally normal. If you are at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, you are interested in academic excellence and research. If you're in the engineering school, academic excellence and research. If you're in the med school, first, that is a majority of the professors at UPenn, academic excellence and research. In the social sciences, not so much. But the vast majority of professors also had lost their nerve to speak their mind because the administration, through the deans and the provosts and the research dollars, had made it difficult for people to speak. And I can understand that because think of how many of us found it difficult to speak. We didn't find it difficult to speak and to protest and to have our voices heard to support immigrants and anti-Trump 1.0. We didn't find it difficult to support things that went against same-sex marriage. We didn't find it difficult as a community to take a position publicly, staunchly, visibly, of almost any liberal position. We found it really difficult as a community to do this because it separated us from who we wanted to be. And we still suffer from that. And so I will tell you the decision to go on TV and simply call for the resignation and call for it the way it was a decision to show people that this could be done and that there would be no consequences. And I can report, not only are there no consequences, there are positive consequences. More than half of our country actually thinks what's going on is insane. The polling actually says 80% plus of people think what's going on is insane. Why are we so afraid to speak the truth? Why can't we, on the one hand, support giving opportunity to people who have an opportunity and not lead to the logical conclusion that we have to sort everyone by group characteristics and afford some groups more support than other groups? I don't know. I think we're in a moment where we have a chance to revisit it. And what I tell every group I speak to, we now know this. Some of us saw it early. Some of us saw it on October 7th. There's no excuse post October 7th. What would we have done differently as a community? What would you have done as a clergy differently? I know I'm estranged from my shul on the West Side because they have still not been able to actually step back and say, we were just wrong. We never thought it would lead to this. And I said, okay, I could understand we were all misled. We're all on notice now. What would we do differently now? I have a lot of good ideas for you.
And I have a great shul for you.
I think there's a deal to be made. Well, you have half of us so far.
So I want to move forward, but one more question on what happened, because it wasn't an uncontroversial stance you took. I'm not for the reasons of the American soul, but as a tactical approach. There were some. I mean, you suggested this campaign of the funding base to give $1 as a form of protest and to pull back. There are others who go by the theory that if you are not sitting at the table, they will eat you for lunch. There are some who say we have to make transformation from within the institution. And there are some who say in the Jewish community, we got to create our own institutions. So, for all my real admiration for your choices, I just want to open up that there were other doors you could have knocked on and other people believe in.
So the death of a university is apathy. That's what people do. So I think the most extreme form of protest is actually apathy. And there are lots of people who have hit that milestone already and just don't care. UPenn was a great experience. It was great for me. Why do I care? I'm going to go support the University of Texas at Austin. And we have lots of that's happened. And I think we are going to see seismic changes in the standing of universities, who is ascendant and who is going to fail. I will insult every Harvard grad in the room by when I walk the halls of Congress, people refer to Harvard as the Boeing of higher education. And don't think for a minute that these reputations last for eternity. They don't. Go back and look who the leading universities were in Europe in the 1930s and the 1940s. They don't exist anymore. It is not that hard to destroy a university. It just takes a period of time. But apathy was not what we did. None of us resigned from the board. None of us stopped engaging. And in fact, if you were a trustee at the University of Pennsylvania, every morning for 50 days at 7 a.m., I sent you an email. And the email said, this is the third day I'm sending you an email. I've attached a letter today from Dick Wolf of Law and Order fame. And Dick is livid because you did this, this, and this. And then I attached the letter. And on day 4, I attached a letter from the 15 last class presidents from a different age who have given no money to the university. And the next day, I attached it from the clergy and the reverends in Philadelphia. And the day after that, Ambassador Huntsman. And the day after that, Ronald Lauder. And I just did this for 50 days, relentlessly. And you can laugh at it, but over time, people could see that they were not just alienating me. I was only the tip of the spear. They were alienating young and old, East Coast and West Coast, engaged, not engaged, and they were destroying a generation. And so I would say things to the interim president like, why would you take a 300-year-old institution that is wholly dependent on federal government funding? Penn is the #1 recipient of NIH funding in the country. And put it at risk if there's a Republican alignment in Congress. This was pre-knowing we'd have a Republican alignment. For the sake of something that you actually, as a scientist, don't believe in. And he has no good answer to that. So I look, and I don't dispute for a minute there are people who said, we'll work from within. I never saw it. There is no structure at a university to work from within. If you are noisy within, you are pushed out. It just doesn't work. If you continue to give and you're at the table, you don't have any power because they don't care. I will tell you that this got their attention, and it's getting their attention at Harvard, and it's getting their attention every place else, because as much money as these universities they have, it's all about the increment. If you're the dean of the Wharton School and you can't fundraise, you have no power. Your next students, your next faculty, your next great professor, they're not coming to UPenn. I will tell you that Chicago, who has mostly gotten it right, kicking Penn's ass. And they know it. And Vanderbilt, Ascendant, University of Texas. I can't tell you how many people were waitlisted at University of Texas from New York this year. University of Florida, ascendant. We're getting to that point where this is starting to add up. And so, yeah, I think there's always a way to justify not speaking up. But mostly, I think it's justifying not speaking up.
Thank you. So let's turn a little prescriptive to what might work. You just mentioned the Chicago principles. I'm thinking in that space, is there a future of civility, of civil discourse on campus where free speech can happen, but all of the chilling effect, whether it's faculty, students, intimidation, harassment, certainly other expressions of marginalizing the Jewish voice. Is it all about the Chicago principles? Is it about time, place, and manner? What could be a prescriptive step that retains a university's commitment to free speech, and yet everything, it's not a free-for-all?
So I think this is going to, my gut tells me this is going to happen as a result of alumni, trustee, student, but mostly government pressure. And I think it's going to happen quickly. I view the university community leadership as sheep. I do not think one needs to go and change thousands of universities. I think you need to change 5. And universities in our country exist as wards of the federal government. And so we are seeing, in fact, I've shared this with you, but I'll summarize the document I sent you. We've had numerous officials from the incoming administration talk about the defunding of woke universities. What no one has done is they haven't sat back and said, what are the circumstances under which we would fund these universities? Because after all, aren't these the differentiator in our world, in our economy, and creating the next generation of leaders? We want them to win. And so I took my hand and put a document together, which was very long, talking about intellectual diversity and all these other things. And I sent it out to a mixed group of 30, a very mixed group of liberals and conservatives and podcasters and lawyers and academics. And everyone kind of got to the same 5 or 6 points. And this is a prescription. In admissions and in faculty hiring, no consideration of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, political viewpoint, religious viewpoint, or otherwise. Merit. That does not mean you cannot hire the best basketball team. That does not mean you cannot hire only first generation in their family. It does not mean you cannot admit or hire people who are poor. It does not admit any of it. It just means you can't discriminate by categories that you should not discriminate by. It's breaking this notion of treating us as groups. Some call it DEI. I think the government's doing it for us anyway. Next is institutional neutrality. As a university, as a community, you should be institutionally neutral. When you speak, speak for yourself. Once the university puts its finger on the scale, it is very difficult for any other member of the community to take a contrary point of view. Academic freedom. You should be able to say what you want in the manner in which you want, subject to whatever time, manner, and place restrictions the university adopts. And each university may adopt different, but you don't get to change that based on the character of the speaker. And permitting or not preventing shout-downs and cancellations and interruptions is not a commitment to free speech. Civil discourse. You can't call for the murder, genocide, or the outward support of organizations that have been banned by the U.S. government as labeled as terrorist organizations. What is so hard about those things? Doesn't mean you have to be conservative. Doesn't mean you have to hire anyone in particular. It basically is kind of the American way. Merit, effort. We're a diverse pool of people. I think we're going to end up there, but I actually think what's going to happen is I think the government I would expect an executive order very shortly, which will form a commission to do this, and I think they will get around to principles like this. But in the meantime, the government has put out an executive order, and the executive order says no DE&I, including by contractors of the federal government, which people now read to be recipients of NIH grants. Okay, it took the stroke of a pen to do that. And that's where we are. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. And I think one or two examples will be made of Columbia is the worst, Cornell, Penn, Michigan. And I think the system will figure out how to get to some neutrality, which will not be a group of conservatives and equally balanced. It'll still be 95% Democrats and 5% Republicans. But so what?
Well, you've gone through all the campuses invited to our Shabbaton.
That was not an accident.
So I don't know whether to celebrate that or mourn that fact. But it is interesting that's somehow representative of the congregation and the rabbinic leadership.
I'm going to just go some minutes. So I did, in preparation for this, I could not help but read your book. So not only did I read it, but I gave it out. So everyone at Apollo is reading it because I'm basically using quotes from it. And the thing that I took away from it goes to the question you asked me, because we got together a couple months ago and you said, how can we prevent the negatives? Now, I had lots of answers for you. I think we're going to have anti-masking legislation. The last time we saw people wearing masks, they were wearing pointy white hoods and white robes, and we didn't think that was okay. I don't know why we think hiding your face with a keffiyeh is fine. Free speech versus anonymous speech. I think we're going to get that. I think we're going to make it so that kids who call for the death of whole people will not be hired in the professional community. Apollo would not hire. We would not hire you if you're anti-black, anti-gay, anti-woman, anti-anything. Why would we hire you if you're an anti-Semite? And we're not going to. And the tools are being developed to identify these kids. And you know what? Bad decisions as a college student have consequences that follow you through your life. That's just the way it is. But all of these things are about preventing the negative. And that's not what I took from your book, because that means we're just fighting, we're playing defense. How do we play offense? So I thought a lot over the past month about what it means on offense. And I think we need to continue to focus on offense. So I had only 3 positives. One, these kids on every campus and in the high schools, they need to know that they're part of a community. That's kind of the lowest level. They need to know there are other Jews, other people who are pro-Israel, and it can be social. It does not have to be educational. It just has to be, no one wants to go to a party that no one else is going to. They need a community. They need to know there's others like them. The second is they need to know that we have their back. So like at Penn, Hope and I didn't know any students. We went to Hillel. We sponsored a Shabbat. We showed up on campus. We sat with the kids. The kids I met at that Hillel turned out to be the kids who testified before Congress, who are the most outspoken, and it's awesome. And every single one of you can go to Shabbat dinner at Hillel, can sponsor a dinner, can get to know these kids, because if they know you have their back, they will be who they are, which is amazing. And the third, they do not want, and this is like different levels of engagement. The third is they do not want to be served up talking points. They actually want the difficult, meaningful, tough conversations about what it means so they can actually come to their own conclusion and be representatives. And out of that, we will get advocacy. But if we ask for advocacy, we will not get advocacy because they will feel they're being sold. I don't know how to do all 3 things, but I think as I look around for my philanthropy, I think about organizations that do one of those 3 things. And I think doubling and tripling down on these sorts of things feels like working on the positive, which is what I want to do. I just don't want to play defense because after all, we want to be proud Jews. We want to be in a situation where people can articulate what makes Israel amazing, while also understanding what makes Israel really screwed up.
So, first of all, in the company of Rabbi Zuckerman, you should know, and the community should know, that at least one of these categories of making sure that our high school students enter into the campus environment by way of the generosity of the Barron's Foundation is making sure that not in the tweet one-liner, but actually a substantive, complex, able to go point, counterpoint, and that's a program that we're going to be unrolling into the year and the years to come. So on that, I do, Mark, think there is another bucket, seeing as it's just me and you schmoozing here, which is, you use the example of Shabbat dinner, right? For me, the best defense, as Lombardi said, is a good offense. And the trick here is to not make Jewish identity as much, let me say this very carefully, as much as my Jewish identity and the identity of this community has Israel at its center, it cannot be contingent on this or that policy of any one Israeli government, right? So the only Jewish identity that can weather the slings and arrows of Middle East politics is a Jewish identity that's rooted in Judaism. And so what we do here at the synagogue day in and day out is to try, as you saw in tonight's service, is to build a vital, proud, positive expression of Jewish life, and then layer on all of the other aspects that you're describing.
I think that's a great fourth.
So we're going to open it up I have about 8,000 more questions, but I want to open it up, and we made a commitment to our high school students. If you don't have a question, I have a lot more, but do we have a high school student who has a question? Yes, and introduce yourself and where you go to high school.
I'm Robert. I go to Hunter College High School, and I was wondering, so you mentioned your legislative victory, changing the definition of anti-Semitism legally, and you said that piece of legislation got support from lawmakers you wouldn't necessarily expect. What do you think changed or resonated with those lawmakers that led them to support this legislation you wouldn't really think they would support?
I wish there could say that there's been substantive change, but there's not substantive change. We're dealing with people who are politicians, and politicians want to stay in office. And if you're a Democratic politician, you mostly serve in a Democratic district, and therefore your fight is in the primary. And the only person who challenges you in the primary is someone who comes from the progressive left, and the progressive left has seen Israel and Jews as oppressors and entitled. And so I don't think for a minute that their politics have actually changed. I think their substance has changed. I think their politics have changed. Just like I don't bask in the support of Republicans, because I think the same dynamic is true on the Republican side, where for unfortunately, the challenge is coming from pro-Israel, pro-Zionist evangelicals and others. So I don't think for a minute that we should be falling in the trap that we are beloved by Republicans and hated by Democrats, or vice versa. I think this is politics at play. But I think, unfortunately, that we as a community, and I know many in the room will not be happy when I say this, we have to hold those people accountable who are in leadership. So the House this year passed a bill, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, 320 votes. Almost nothing gets through the House on a bipartisan basis. The Senate had 70 votes, and the president said he would sign it. And one man kept this from becoming law, Senator Schumer. He would not put the bill on the floor because he knew it would pass, and more Republicans would support it than Democrats. And we need to keep people who are Jewish and even who are close to us, we need to actually hold them to account, especially when they hold themselves out as protectors of the Jewish community. And it's one of the other things I've had to say publicly, and it has not made me popular, but it's true.
Thank you. Debbie, did you have a hand up there, Debbie Abramowitz?
Thank you. Mark, thank you very much for everything that your leadership and what you've done for the Jewish community. I have a question around foreign funding for universities, institutions of higher education. Do you think that there should be any restrictions on foreign contributions to American universities?
So I do think there should be restrictions. There actually is legislation that requires disclosure of these restrictions, the administration for the last 4 years has not chosen to enforce it. Nonetheless, we have seen the beginning of the disclosure of foreign contributions. The single largest foreign contribution was Qatar to Texas A&M. And Texas A&M closed their Doha campus after this came out, and the Texas legislator basically said you can get money from one place, but not both. One oil-rich entity, but not two oil-rich entities. But as a general matter, I do not believe that it is foreign money influencing our universities and that we are somehow, the pawns in a game being done elsewhere. I think there is foreign money in the protest movement that we saw this last year. It was very easy to hire professional protesters in the city of Philadelphia to work the Penn campus. Most of the people we saw at Columbia and we saw at Penn and we saw at a number of these institutions were not even students at these universities. And many of them we captured on video. They were at every protest at every university. And I do think we will find out eventually who funded and how that was funded. And I don't think it was very expensive. But the whole university system, I do not think is polluted by foreign money. But I think we will get disclosure also from this administration.
Do we have another high school student? Phoebe, on the cusp of your bat mitzvah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Phoebe. I also go to Hunter College High School. My question is, what do you think really made these campuses kind of try to want to change? Do you think it was the stopping of funding? Do you think it was all the protests or the lawsuits? What do you think made them feel like they had to do something?
I'm not sure they feel like they had to do something. So I want to start with good news, and it's what I say to students everywhere, every time. Every bit of research everywhere in the country says that 80+% of kids are totally normal and are not calling for the genocide of Jewish people. They don't support this. Like kids everywhere, they want to get ahead. They want to what's good for their family, their friends, themselves. They want to have a good time. They want a college experience. We saw a relatively small number of people on a small number of campuses. And at the University of Texas, where President Jay Hartzell was confronted with this, or the University of Florida, where President Ben Sasse was confronted with this, he said, these are the rules. If you violate these rules, you will be out. Guess what? Protests dissipated, everything went away. At places like the University of Pennsylvania and at Columbia University, they had a hard time actually just saying, these are the rules, and you're out. And this gets back to this notion of there's no one in charge. There's no model. When you're the president of a university and the trustees have not set an agenda for what you're supposed to do, you're influenced by the loudest voices in your community. And often the loudest voices in the community are those people in the faculty senate. The faculty senate in most of the elite universities is dominated by liberal arts faculty because they're the ones who have time to dedicate to this. This is a quote from many universities, and they scream very loudly because they fundamentally believe that the world should be organized around a, post-colonial educational system, dividing people into the oppressed and the oppressors. And if you're the oppressed, it does not matter what you do, you can never do something wrong. And if you're the oppressor, it does not matter what you can do, you can never do something right. And it is a very simplistic view of the world being taught at leading academic institutions by people who literally hold this worldview. And I think that's fine, as long as there are other worldviews and one view does not become dominant on campus. So I don't think these campuses have changed. I think where we are is most of these campuses have interim presidents now, and they are straddling. Straddling is a technical term, which means you're not actually leading. You can't figure out which way to go. And so I think we have a moment, a political moment, an economic moment, a U.S. patriotic moment, a war hopefully is over moment, to push these campuses in a direction that is not a Republican direction, a conservative direction, a liberal direction, a democratic direction, but in a common sense direction. What is the fundamental purpose of a university? Is it dissemination of knowledge, training next generation of leaders in research? Or is it to reorder the social structure of the country based on the perceived desirability of a certain social structure of a small group of its members? Me, for one, I choose not to give money to places that do things that I fundamentally disagree with. I don't know why that's controversial.
Okay, let's do maybe 2 more questions, and maybe we'll take them both at the same time. So, yes, name, school, question, and then we'll do 1 more.
Hi, thank you for coming and speaking. My name is Noah. I go to the Browning School. And my question is, why do you think people, especially students and faculty on campus, have become so polarized and in that same way disillusioned by a false and anti-Semitic narrative? And how has social media propelled this issue?
Okay, so you got that one. I've ignored this side. Is there one? Yeah, Brooke. Hold on. Let's get a microphone.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm a quasi-proud alumni of Penn. I gave my $1. My question...
Thank you.
Of course. $1.8. My question is, what should an average Joe Schmo with, not a ton of influence or money quite yet do, in this era to kind of push this agenda and the agenda we all believe in here?
So I'll start there. Exactly the same thing you're doing. You are the future of all these universities. The more they hear a consistent message from a large number of people, they understand that they're living on borrowed time because eventually it's all coming to you. And they understand that they have real difficulty. I will tell you, at a place like UPenn, there's massive suffering still from a financial point of view because leadership is straddling. Once they pick a direction, people love the place. Like, I changed my life. I would love to give to the University of Pennsylvania, but I can't justify it until I know they're not going to misuse my money. It would be the height of stupidity to do that. So we live in a world, and this will come back to the other question, where we in this room, we're really focused on this issue. I have news for you. Most people don't care. Most people don't know anything. They don't come every day thinking about what's going on in Israel and the Middle East. They don't have any history. They don't have any background. And to the extent you are not willing to educate yourself, you are influenced by the loudest voice in the room. And so there's a series of articles. Some were done by the Wall Street Journal, some were done by the Financial Times and elsewhere. And they went into these crowds of kids chanting from the river to the sea, calling for the genocide of Jews in Israel. And they asked really simple questions. What river? What sea? Who lives between the river and the sea? How'd they get there? And once people actually heard the answers to these questions in real time, the vast, vast majority of people changed their point of view. And so what I see and what I believe, I am not someone who's pessimistic that the world is out to get us, that, we've been complacent for 70 years and that we don't have a place in society. I just think we haven't done our part. We stood up for every other community. And I will tell you, and this is probably the only fight Hope and I have had in 40 years. In the Black Lives Matter protest, I thought Hope was out of her mind because I was unable to overlook the anti-Semitism that came right away in the George Floyd protest. I was like, are you joking? You're actually going to put up a BLM sticker? And our University of Pennsylvania president at the time, Amy Gutman, in 3 loud chants for BLM, BLM, BLM. I was like, I can feel terrible about what happened. I can feel the community is aggrieved. I can actually sympathize with what they're doing. But I cannot shy away and ignore their anti-Semitism. And we did this. We did it because we wanted to be on these elite boards. We did it because we didn't want to make waves. We did it because we think of ourselves as liberals. And if all of us in this room and all of us in all the power and all the influence and all the give back that we do to the community, if we actually just speak our minds and we don't let these things slide, we're going to have a tremendous impact because most people just don't know anything. And when you call them out, no one really wants to be thought of as a racist, which is what they are. And so I come at this, I think we have a moment right now. We may not like everything about what's happening politically, but we have to accept that we have a space now that is going to put tremendous pressure on universities where we have some tailwinds, and we should take advantage of them. Thank you.
Thank you. As Rabbi Kaufman, Rabbi Zosmer, and Rabbi Zuckerman said, the story in which we find ourselves is a story of leadership. And I can think of very few people who have risen to the moment, found their voice, and positively impacted the present and the future of our people as you, Marc Rowan. It's such an honor to have you here. We celebrate your achievements and look forward to many more. Thank you.